This is America Now with Andy Dean.
Did you say Utes?
Yeah, 2 Utes.
What is a Ute?
Oh, excuse me, Your Honor. 2 youths.
Welcome back. Beginning of the third hour. We're going to get to our legal segment, all the top stories of the day. We're going to bring on New York criminal defense attorney Adam Thompson. He's been practicing for over 25 years. The guy knows the law. Just take his word for it. Right, Adam?
Hey, that's it exactly. You nailed it.
All right, brother. So we're going to talk about this Harvard student who called in a bomb threat. We're going to discuss the case in Texas where the spoiled rich kid murdered 4 people with his car, and then the judge didn't even give him prison time. Next, we'll talk about the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico 3 years ago and what happened in the aftermath. It's an amazing story. And lastly, George Zimmerman's attorney is in the news. All right, Mr. Thompson, let's begin at the beginning. Yesterday, Harvard University, the case of Eldo Kim. This is a kid who didn't want to take his final exams. We can all understand that. He had Gov 1368, which is the Politics of American Education, and he was not looking forward to this exam. So he decided to call in a bomb threat in which, well, actually, he emailed in the bomb threat in which he said that there are 4 buildings around campus that were going to blow up as part of this hoax bomb threat. They located this student because he didn't cover his tracks well enough. And now Eldo Kim, 20 years old, the good news is I guess he won't be taking final exams for a long time to come. What will he be facing?
Well, I mean, this is a pretty, insane case when you get down to it. You have a Harvard student. Obviously, this kid is very bright. You know, he has the credentials, the pedigree. He got into Harvard, a top school, top program. And to get out of an exam that he felt he wasn't prepared for, rather than try to do an incomplete and, go to the professor directly, he phones in or does a bomb threat. I mean, I've never even heard of anything remotely close to this. So this is as usual as a criminal case will get. I mean, basically he's going to be facing all kind of charges from conspiracy or terroristic threats. So it can be pretty substantial. The bail in the case alone was $100,000. So when you're talking about just a situation of someone with no prior record, and, he obviously comes from a good family background and all that, when you determine bail, you really look at the overall circumstances, and for a $100,000 bond in a case like this, just based on a hoax phone call, that shows how seriously they're taking it to make it so high. So, I mean, ultimately, will this kid see jail time? I mean, if I was defending this kid, ultimately, you're going to focus on the things I said, that this kid really has no prior background, never been in trouble before, has a big future ahead of him, and this guy freaked out over an exam and certainly did something that's as stupid as it can ever be. And, you see all these other people killing people, like, the drunk driver case, people running people over, killing 4 people. We're going to be getting to that story soon, and he gets probation. So, this kid doing something stupid like calling in a fake bomb threat, it's like calling in a phony 911 call, but at a higher level. You really send this kid to jail for a long time? You can. Will they? I don't know. So it's kind of hard to say what's going to happen. But he's certainly facing jail time in the case. But will he get it or not? That's another story.
Right. The maximum penalty in this case, 5 years in prison, $250,000 fine. If you're a betting man, what time does he do? Any time, or he does just probation and he pays a fine? What happens? Give us your final assessment.
Well, I don't know about paying the fine because he's a student, unless the money was going to come from his parents or for some other source. So the fine is pointless. I mean, it'll probably be some very serious, I think, probation time. 5 or 10 years, whatever the max they could give him in that state is, and I think maybe some even home confinement where he has to serve time, but maybe wear a bracelet on his wrist or his ankle, and he has to be monitored and be under curfew. They might do that. If he gets jail time, I don't see 5 years in prison for it. Maybe they give him a year or 2 if his defense attorney does the job right.
All right. Next story, once again with Adam Thompson, New York criminal defense attorney. You can reach him adamthompsonlaw.com. Adam, this is the teen affluenza case, which most of America has heard by now. This is outside Fort Worth, Texas. Teenager Ethan Couch, 16 years old, got wasted. He was driving his car. It was a truck, actually. He was 3 times the legal limit as far as alcohol is concerned. He was a 0.24, and he was on prescription meds, including Valium, when he barreled into 4 innocent bystanders and murdered all of them. Also, somebody in the car that was riding with him is now paralyzed, and that individual can only communicate by blinking. And this teenager who was responsible for all this, he emerged without injury, which is some sort of whacked out karma in reverse. And then the judge hearing his case, this is Judge Jean Boyd, because we air in Texas. I want people to know who's responsible for this. That is Judge Jean Boyd. She decided that this whacked out psychopath shouldn't go to prison, that he should get 10 years probation in a very fancy probation house that's located in Malibu, California, even though he murdered 4 people. And she's blaming it on affluenza, that the kid grew up with wealth and privilege, and so he didn't understand boundaries, and so he wasn't really responsible for murdering these 4 people. There's been a little bit of a twist in this case, though, and that this judge is now obviously in trouble for what she did, but they may be able to sentence this 16-year-old kid for a separate charge, which is intoxication assault. So he's not going to get in trouble for the murders, but they may get him on a different charge. What do you see here?
Again, another very unique case. This is like the first time I ever heard of this defense ever being raised or asserted. It's like the Twinkie defense. You know, you're on a sugar rush too much and it's going to affect, you know, how you behave and what you do. So this is really like a groundbreaking angle by a defense attorney by bringing in an expert to testify about this. To me, I think it's completely hokey and ridiculous, and it's pretty disgusting when you look at it because, you know, basically any rich person could say, I live such a privileged life and everything's given to me that I never had to ask for or want for anything. So I don't appreciate the dangers or consequences of things I do, like maybe drunk driving. You know, next thing may be like shooting AK-15 out my window and taking target practice because I have a big backyard, not realizing maybe the bullets would travel to another property and shoot someone through the head.
Adam, I got to ask, this judge, Jean Boyd is her name. Once again, Jean Boyd. For everybody down there in Texas as to who's responsible for this. She is so unstable and so psychotic, this judge. How does it work when a judge does something this bizarre? Do we consider legal charges against the judge? What is our recourse against a judge this unstable?
You can't bring charges against the judge. All you can do, if you're in this case and you're subjected to a judge that really is going really awry the law and not following really precedent that's out there. You know, whether you're the prosecutor or the defense attorney, your only recourse is to file appeals. Now, you can also file a complaint. You know, there's judicial screening committees that are out there to have the judge looked into and investigated to see that if what this judge is doing is so improper that it's beyond the normal conduct and actions of a judge that they need to take action. You know, if it's a judge that's always not following the law or always circumventing the process, then, you know, one time they may forgive you. 2 times, you know, shame on me then. So it's one of those kind of processes, and they'll certainly be looking into this. I mean, she tried to cover herself in the back door by saying if there's any violation during this 10-year period of the probation, which she has to complete all these different community services, and again, home confinement like we talked about before, wearing a bracelet and everything, you know, then the sentence is 10 years. So
I just want, I want to get this. So the judge, when dealing with a guy who murdered 4 people, imagine if you're a family member. I don't want to get emotional because I know the law is reason absent of emotion. But you've got 4 people who are murdered and then somebody else who is paralyzed who can only communicate through blinking. And the judge decides no prison time. Not only is this setting a bad precedent, I think that this is a public safety risk with what the judge is doing to society. And the fact that she's outside the guidelines, I just don't know how she reserves the right to be able to not send somebody to prison. I mean, in that case, couldn't a judge, if you've got a serial killer, decide, oh, well, I feel bad for the serial killer, so I'm going to sentence him to probation? At what point can a judge completely be stripped of their power?
Well, the problem is, you know, as long as the sentencing guideline is going to give discretion to a judge, and obviously in this state, the way the guidelines are written for these type of charges, it does give discretion to a judge what they could sentence somebody to. These are the kind of results that you're going to get. And, you know, I've been on countless shows talking about this same topic. On my own radio show, I talk about it, that if you're tired of things like this, you could yell at the judge all you want, but if the judge has the discretion to do it, then it's not the judge's fault. The judge is then free to do what they want. You got to change the law. You got to make it that mandatory minimums for certain kind of Act.
Look, I'm a big believer in mandatory minimums, but I think public shame is very, very valuable, and that's why Judge Jean Boyd of Texas needs to be publicly shamed, so when she's out in public, people look at her with disdain, and they shame her, as she should be. Now, there's one other part of this case.
The shame isn't going to change what's happened to those 4 dead people and the kid who's paralyzed and can only blink.
Oh, yeah, look, if it was a family member of mine, I legally can't say what I would do to make the situation right, but I would make it right.
Well, fortunately, hopefully, judges that run for election, there should be scorecards kept on judges, and when they do come up for re-election, you absolutely should vote them out, and people that follow those same kind of ways of thinking. Because if you want to change how the judges are going to behave on the bench, then you got to send a message by how you vote them in and vote them out of office. That would be one of the best ways of doing it. Okay, and Adam, one other thing. So this kid gets to skate by on the 4 murders that he committed, and then the one guy that he paralyzed. But on the 2 intoxication assaults, there's been no verdict that's formally been entered. So is the idea that the district attorney may be able to get this kid in jail somehow through the back door? No different than O.J. Simpson. He murdered 2 people, and then he ended up going to jail a few years later for robbery. Is there a way to get this kid in jail on some sort of other offense? Well, if it's going to the same judge, probably not, because she's not going to send him to jail on the murder-related charges, the manslaughter-related charges. She's not going to do it on assault-related charges. So the only hope they have is that there's some other charges that don't, violate some form of double jeopardy, that he was already brought up on charges and these are just backdooring the same kind of facts again. But if there's a way to do a different set of charges unrelated, and it goes before a different, venue, a different judge hearing it, then certainly another judge may give jail time. Right. Okay. So once again, Judge Jean Boyd, for all of our Texas listeners, Judge Jean Boyd is responsible for this. And I know Governor Rick Perry is already looking into this, so Jean Boyd will face the consequences of her action, hopefully by being removed from the bench. Okay, Adam, I want to take a quick break if I could. When we come back, I want to talk about the BP oil spill from April of 2010 and whatever happened to that as far as the legal claims. This is an amazing story of one of Obama's top donors who became one of the top lawyers in this case, suing British Petroleum. But it appears that this lawyer has engaged in, quote, brazen fraud, and now the BP oil company is suing this Obama friend, this attorney, for what is massive fraud for creating phantom cases in the BP oil spill. It's an amazing story. And then also, why is George Zimmerman's lawyer, Mark O'Mara, in the news? We're going to discuss why the Florida bar is looking into George Zimmerman's attorney and what that could all mean. All right, more with Adam Thompson, who's obviously doing a great job and is a great attorney. New York criminal defense attorney Adam Thompson, AdamThompsonLaw.com. Join me on Facebook, America Now with Andy Dean. More with Adam right after this.
You're listening to Andy Dean on America Now.
Welcome back. Rejoining us for the legal segment, Adam Thompson, New York criminal defense attorney. You can see him at AdamThompsonLaw.com. He's been practicing for over 25 years. The guy knows his stuff. Adam, welcome back, my friend.
Great to be back. Thanks for having me on, as always.
Cool, man. You got it. All right, let's talk about the BP oil spill and Obama corruption. And then lastly, George Zimmerman's attorney is in the news, and Zimmerman's attorney is being investigated. So I want to get your thought on that. But first, to the British Petroleum oil spill, BP oil spill, back in April of 2010, and the legal follow-up. So BP put aside billions of dollars to compensate people affected by the oil spill, which is a nice idea. They messed up. They should pay. That's how it works, right? And then the legal process took over. One of the lead attorneys who filed the most claims against the BP oil company was a guy by the name of Mikhail Watts. And Mikhail Watts also is one of Barack Obama's biggest fundraisers. He hosted a $35,800 a plate, $35,800 a plate to have dinner with the president at his home. So he's one of these Obama guys. And it turns out that he filed claims on behalf of 40,000 people, but after a little bit of time went by, it realized that these claims, most of them were fraudulent. And I have the statistics here. 98% of the claims filed by this Obama friend and attorney, it ended up that they weren't even legitimate, that the claims couldn't even be filed. So the reason why he announced this gigantic number of claims, which are 40,000 claims, is he wanted BP to put aside billions of more dollars because BP thought that they were facing so many more claims. Now, of those 2% of claims that actually went through that seemed legitimate, after investigation, of those 2% of claims, 96% of those claims were denied because the Social Security numbers either belonged to dead people, or once they investigated, they realized that there were fake Social Security numbers associated to those claims. So it turns out that almost all of these claims by Obama's friend and lawyer against British Petroleum were phantom claims. And this was such brazen fraud that now British Petroleum is suing Obama's lawyer for potentially wasting and, it'd be fraudulent claims. So billions of dollars that could have been paid out fraudulently. What do you have for us here?
Again, this is one of those outrageous kind of situations because what this claim was set up for is to help people. There were so many people that were affected by what went on down there and with this Gulf spill that, you had businesses that were completely decimated, destroyed, and they'll never recover. So there's a lot of people in the thousands that have legitimate...
Correct. And I want to make sure that we're very serious about that. About 5,000 people had legitimate, honest claims. But this one attorney who supposedly rounded up the most people, this is Obama's friend, 96% to 98%, depending on which numbers you're looking at, were completely bogus and fraudulent. And that's what I want to focus on in this legal case. Not the legitimate people, because there certainly are. I want to talk about the fraud.
Yeah, the problem with a lot of these class actions, just as a little bit of background, when these class actions first come out, whether there's a drug in the pharmaceutical area or whatever it may be, lawyers who practice in these areas, they do mass advertising, whether it's billboards, newspapers. You can't watch TV without saying, have you been injured by this or may have been injured by this or even think you've been injured by this, call this number. And they just round up as many people as they can, and without even doing sometimes big investigations into the validity of those claims, it's basically just collecting as many people as you can. So they can...
And I just want to interrupt, Adam. I'm not talking about a big investigation because I get it. When you're setting up a class action and you're rounding up 1,000 people or 5,000 people, you can't afford to investigate every single one. But at a bare minimum, the Social Security number should be legitimate. And in this case, the Social Security numbers were fraudulent or they belonged to dead people, or one of the claimants, this is not a joke, one of the claimants in this fraud, the Social Security number was 000/00/0001.
You would think on its face that it's completely bogus. That's what I'm saying. The problem is a lot of these lawyers, it's like a steeplechase to get the most clients, so then whoever petitions the court can say, I have the most clients, therefore appoint me as lead counsel. The reason being, lead counsel is going to collect the bulk of the attorney fee that's going to be awarded in this case. When you hear that BP's paying in the billions out, a good chunk of that in the hundreds of millions is going to go towards attorney fees. So you have to look at the overall case, as you brought up. How did this guy even get appointed? Was it an accident that he's holding basically $40,000 plate dinners for Obama, and then he gets appointed on a steering committee?
Exactly. I wanted to talk about the political connection. Hey, Adam, I hate to do this, and I do apologize for interrupting, but we have 20 seconds left. George Zimmerman's attorney is getting investigated by the Florida bar. In 15 seconds or less, what do you think this is about?
It's really odd. I would think if I had to pinpoint it on something, it may relate to some of the discovery issues that came up during the trial, or it could relate to the fund that was set up with Zimmerman and how money came in and how it was dispersed. Okay, so we'll keep our eyes open. Adam Thompson, thanks so much, man. Great job. AdamThompsonLaw.com. Thank you, brother. Thank you, Andy.
Take care. Okay, cool. When we come back, producer Miranda in studio. We got some top headlines, stuff like that. I'm Andy Dean.